Elizabeth Bathory, born in 1560 into one of the most powerful noble families in Hungary, was destined for privilege. Her family controlled vast estates, commanded armies, and held influence at the royal court. She grew up surrounded by luxury, but also by brutality. From her earliest days, violence was not hidden from her. It was woven into the fabric of noble life. Hungary, in the late 16th century, was a land scarred by war, superstition, and cruelty. The Ottoman Empire pressed on its borders, peasant revolts simmered under the weight of feudal oppression, and nobles enforced their authority with the sword. Executions, whippings, and public torture were not exceptional spectacles. They were routine demonstrations of power, and young Elizabeth was watching. From the start, Elizabeth's upbringing shaped her into something far darker than an ordinary aristocrat. Family stories claim she witnessed executions and punishments as a child, sometimes even observing as servants were whipped bloody for minor mistakes. In some accounts, she delighted in the sight, a chilling foreshadow of what was to come. Some historians believe Elizabeth also suffered from epileptic seizures in childhood, perhaps due to inbreeding in her powerful family line. Remedies of the day included rubbing animal blood onto her lips, or even bathing in it to stop convulsions. If true, this could have planted the seed for her later obsession with blood. At 15, Elizabeth married Count Ferenc Nadasdy, a powerful Hungarian warlord. Their marriage united two of the wealthiest families in Hungary, cementing Elizabeth's position as one of the most powerful women in Europe. Ferenc was often away at war, leaving Elizabeth in charge of their vast estate, Chaktic Castle. As the lady of the castle, she wielded absolute authority over hundreds of peasants and servants. To defy her was unthinkable. Elizabeth was not merely a noblewoman, she was a ruler in her own right. And with this power came opportunity, the ability to do as she pleased behind castle walls, free from scrutiny, protected by her name. It was here that Elizabeth's cruelty began to take its most terrifying form. While other nobles might beat or whip disobedient servants, Elizabeth allegedly escalated punishments into sadistic rituals. Servants whispered that she enjoyed inflicting pain, that she found pleasure in watching others suffer. When her husband was home, he may have encouraged this streak. Ferenc was known as the Black Hero of Hungary, a man who delighted in brutality against the Ottomans. Some legends claim he even taught Elizabeth new methods of torment. By the time he died in 1604, leaving Elizabeth widowed and in full control of her estates, her sadism was no longer a rumor. It had become routine. Bathory's position gave her unparalleled power to prey upon those beneath her. Peasant families often sent their daughters to noble houses to work as servants, seamstresses, or attendants. It was considered an honor, a chance for a girl to gain security and even protection. But those who entered Chaktic Castle under Elizabeth's watch often vanished. The whispers grew louder. The lady of the castle was not merely strict, she was cruel beyond comprehension. Witnesses would later testify that Elizabeth began with small acts of violence, slaps, pinches, or forcing servants to strip naked in the cold. But soon these escalated into savage beatings, mutilations, and worse. The cruelty was not a loss of temper, it was calculated. Elizabeth Bathory, it seemed, did not just punish, she enjoyed it. What made Elizabeth so dangerous was not only her sadism, but her immunity. As a noblewoman, she was untouchable. Peasants who whispered of her crimes could be punished themselves for slander. Families whose daughters disappeared dared not accuse her directly. They knew it would mean ruin or death. Protected by her wealth, her title, and her vast estate, Elizabeth Bathory's crimes festered in secrecy. Behind the thick walls of Chaktic Castle, far from the eyes of law and king, she built a private world where her word was law and human lives were toys to be broken. And this was only the beginning. For in the years that followed, Elizabeth Bathory would become something more than a cruel noblewoman. She would become a legend of horror, accused of torturing and murdering hundreds of young women, bathing in their blood, and earning the title of the Blood Countess. Whether all of the tales are true or not, one thing is certain. Elizabeth Bathory's reign of terror began not with bloodbaths, but with the slow, steady corruption of unchecked power. A house of horror, the castle as a prison. If Elizabeth Bathory's sadism was born of privilege, it was Choctaw Castle that allowed it to thrive. Perched high on a hill in present-day Slovakia, this fortress became more than a noble estate. It became a chamber of horrors, a labyrinth where young women vanished, never to be seen alive again. Choctaw Castle was both imposing and isolated. Its high stone walls and commanding view of the surrounding countryside made it nearly impossible for anyone inside to escape unnoticed. For the peasants who lived nearby, the castle loomed as a symbol of power, authority, and increasingly, dread. To outsiders, it was a respectable, noble residence. To those who served within, it was a cage. Elizabeth ruled it with absolute authority, aided by a retinue of loyal servants who enforced her will. And as whispers of her cruelty spread, Choctaw gained a darker reputation. It was a place where young girls entered but never returned. Elizabeth's victims were not kidnapped in the dead of night. Many came willingly, even eagerly. Poor families often sent their daughters to noble households for work, hoping they might find stability or advancement. Elizabeth's noble status made her an attractive patron. To be chosen to serve the Countess was considered an honor, but for many it was a death sentence. Witnesses later described how Elizabeth would summon groups of young women to the castle under the guise of employment, seamstresses, maids, or attendants, only for them to disappear within weeks. Parents who inquired were brushed off with excuses. The girl had run away, fallen ill, or been dismissed. Few dared press further, for to accuse a Bathory was to invite ruin. Inside the castle, certain chambers became infamous. Some testimonies spoke of hidden rooms and dungeons where the Countess carried out her torments. Windows were shuttered, walls thickened, and screams that might have escaped into the night were muffled by stone. Peasants claimed to see smoke rise at odd hours, or to hear faint cries carried by the wind. Servants whispered of secret cellars where bodies were disposed of, or shallow graves dug hurriedly near the castle grounds. Elizabeth did not act alone. Her accomplices, trusted servants such as Dorothea Sentes, Ilona Jo, and Janos Ujivari, allegedly helped restrain victims, clean up after the tortures, and dispose of corpses. Together, they transformed Choctaw into a machine of cruelty. For the girls who lived there, daily life must have been a waking nightmare. They never knew when Elizabeth's temper would flare, when she might decide to punish one of them for a mistake, real or imagined. A misfolded garment, a poorly brushed lock of hair, or a word spoken too softly could bring her wrath. Witnesses described how punishments began as beatings but escalated into mutilation. Some were locked in freezing chambers, stripped naked in the snow, or burned with irons. Others were starved, pricked with needles, or beaten until their flesh split open. Every corner of the castle held terror. The kitchens where boiling water or hot oil could become weapons, the bedrooms where Elizabeth might summon a girl under pretense of service only to torment her, the cellars where screams echoed in darkness. As years passed, the number of victims grew impossible to ignore. Rumors spread in nearby villages of shallow graves found near the castle, of carts carrying bodies under cover of night. Some said wolves dragged bones into the open fields. Priests began to whisper that something unnatural was happening at Choctaw, and yet Elizabeth's nobility shielded her. Who could accuse one of the most powerful women in Hungary without risking their own life? The bodies, however, could not be hidden forever. Servants testified that sometimes corpses were left lying in halls or stairways, too numerous to dispose of quickly. Even Elizabeth herself grew careless, so accustomed was she to impunity. Choctaw Castle was more than the scene of Elizabeth's crimes. It was the enabler. Its walls gave her privacy. Its servants enforced her will, and its isolation silenced the screams of the dying. For the villagers below, the castle became less a fortress of protection than a looming prison. They prayed their daughters would not be summoned, that their families would escape the Countess's gaze. But in a world where nobles ruled with absolute authority, few had any power to resist. Over time, Choctaw gained a reputation not only as the dwelling of a cruel noblewoman, but as a house of horror, a cursed place where evil lingered. Later, legends embellished the story: secret torture chambers bristling with devices, walls that absorbed the blood of victims, ghosts of murdered girls wandering the halls. While some of these details blur fact with folklore, one truth is undeniable: the castle was the perfect setting for Elizabeth's crimes. Its very stones seemed to conspire with her, hiding her atrocities until they grew too vast to conceal. Rituals of pain, methods of torture and murder. If Choctaw Castle was the stage, then Elizabeth Bathory's sadism was the performance, a ritual of pain repeated again and again, with young women as unwilling participants. What set Elizabeth apart from ordinary cruelty was not only the scale of her violence, but the creativity of it. Witnesses later testified to methods of torture so varied and shocking that they blurred the line between punishment and ritualistic obsession. Many testimonies began with the same detail: the beatings. Elizabeth was said to fly into fits of rage at the smallest mistake: a dress not sewn tightly enough, a towel left unfolded, a curl of hair out of place. She would strike the servant mercilessly, using her fists, whips, or heavy wooden clubs. But these were not ordinary punishments. Witnesses described beatings so savage that flesh split open, bones broke, and blood spattered the walls. Some girls were beaten to death in a single night, their bodies dragged away before dawn. Others lingered, crippled and scarred, until the Countess decided to end their suffering. Elizabeth's cruelty extended far beyond blows. Servants testified that she often used fire as a weapon. Girls were burned with red-hot irons pressed against their skin, branding them like cattle. Some were forced to hold burning candles until the wax melted into their flesh. Others were doused with boiling water or oil, their screams echoing through the stone chambers. On winter nights, some were stripped naked and forced into the snow, doused with water until they froze. Villagers claimed to find bodies stiff and pale near the castle grounds, their faces twisted in agony. Blades were another of Elizabeth's tools. Some victims were slashed repeatedly, left to bleed slowly. Others had their lips, noses, or fingers cut off. One account tells of girls forced to eat pieces of their own flesh torn from their bodies. The Countess was said to take particular pleasure in tormenting hands and faces, slapping, pricking with needles, or slicing with scissors. These acts carried a cruel symbolism: the hands that had failed in service, the faces that had dared to look at her. Elizabeth's cruelty was not always immediate. Some victims were locked in chains